how Mayor Bass opted not to deploy the city's crisis response team to the fire. I think it was definitely murder.
Yes, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey, everybody, happy Friday. So, before we dive into today's topics, Stephanie, I have to tell you about this conversation I had with my husband because he listened to our Wednesday episode. And the first thing he said when he came home, he was like, there's a reason that they spend that kind of money on ice cream and steak and lobster. And I was
Like it
like,
wasn't just for Biden and the children in the tunnels.
correct. Yeah. He said, that's the biggest morale booster on deployment is like the steak
Hmm,
and lobster dinners and ice cream. And I'm like, okay.
that makes
So,
sense.
yes. And so I will walk back the negative comments I said about the steak and ice cream if it was for deployed military personnel. If it
Yeah,
was to
because they deserve
fucking,
it. They
right.
deserve
Yeah.
all the ice cream in the world.
Exactly. If it was instead for Biden's staff, or as you mentioned, children in the tunnels, then that's a whole other story. But I will respect that if it was for the troops, then I'm on board.
Well, thank you to your husband for correcting us
Yeah.
because you know what? I never claimed to know it all. So it's nice to know that they're at least doing that for the troops. I mean, I think they could do a lot more, but that's great.
I have to say, like, sadly, I didn't even consider that when I,
I didn't either. I heard ice cream and I just pictured Biden, oddly like licking his vanilla ice cream and my mind went elsewhere. So
yeah,
bad on me.
I just pictured a bunch of people sitting around, in the White House, a bunch of wealthy elite fucks eating, steak and lobster. So,
Which
you
I'm
know,
sure they do. I'm sure
yeah.
there's a whole separate budget for their steak and lobster.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I just had to say that. But speaking of Biden, he gave his farewell speech on Wednesday night. And honestly, I don't know if this is even worth mentioning or talking about. Did you watch any of it?
No. Honestly, I mean, I almost feel guilty. Like I could care less. I'm like, I'm so done with him. Like, goodbye. Bring in the new administration.
What is it? Three more days, 4 more days?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But I will say there seemed to be like bipartisan agreement about the speech and how fucking terrible it was. And I myself did not watch the entire thing, but I did watch some clips and it was fucking dark. It was like the dark Brandon, State of the Union that he gave a few years ago.
Was it like Dark Brandon hopped up on adrenaline, or was it like old man Biden, Dark Brandon?
It was old man Biden, dark
Ooh,
Brandon, because
that's the
it was,
worst.
yeah, it was the old man rhetoric. And you know how, like, over the last couple years, it seems like his eyes have gotten smaller and smaller as he gets
He
more and
can
more
barely keep them
squinty.
open.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all you see is like this squinty little face trying to read off the teleprompter. And it was just creepy. And the only thing I will say is I want to play one clip, a short clip, because it was the epitome of the Biden admin's hypocrisy. And in this clip, he's basically warning the country about the danger of wealthy people abusing power. Now, keep in mind, this is just what a few days after giving the Medal of Freedom to fucking George Soros, one of the
Right.
wealthiest people in the world. So,
Yeah.
so listen to this short clip.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. And that's the dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra wealthy people. The dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America. We've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up for the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes.
Okay, he kind of goes off rambling there, but
Someone should tell him. Like, that's why everyone voted for Trump, because you are
exactly.
the elite cabal. It's so
Yeah.
typical, though. It's like whatever they're doing, they blame Trump of doing. Like, we've seen this over and over again, but it's just so, I mean, the icing on the cake, though, because like you said, George Soros, you give him the Medal of Freedom, but then you're going to make that speech. No one's buying it anymore. Just go retire, go sit on your beach and eat your ice cream. Oh my God. Well, I didn't see that speech, but I did see this clip of Biden being asked by a reporter if he was responsible for the Israel Gaza, ceasefire deal, or if it was Trump. And he just like stops and he's like, "Is that a joke?" And then gave that creepy ass, like sinister smile and walked off. And the reporters are just like, what? Okay, that wasn't even it's just so ridiculous. But it's typical Biden. Like he's going to try and take all the credit for this deal when we all know the only reason it's happening now is because Trump told Netanyahu that it needs to be done before he gets in office. And then he made that public statement saying that there will be hell to pay if the deal isn't done by then. So it's like everyone knows what's going on, but Biden's, of course, as usual, in his own little world. But Trump posted on Truth Social saying this epic ceasefire agreement could not, I'm sorry, it could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I'm thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. With this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy in the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. We will continue promoting peace through strength throughout the region as we build upon the momentum of this ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. This is only the beginning of great things to come for America and indeed the world. We have achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed so they can secure more victories for the United States. And well said. Just another thing that he's accomplished without even being in the White House yet.
Do you know what makes me laugh though? When you read like Trump's Truth Social posts, the words he chooses to capitalize, just like random words in the sentence. I always wonder, is there like rhyme or reason to what he chooses to do?
Okay, there's a whole conspiracy around that. Like, all the QAnon people,
Yeah.
I think it was the QAnon people that were saying, like, if you put all the words together, I don't know if it was like you put all the words together or you take like the first letter of each word, there's like hidden messages and everything. But I don't know. I never really bought into all the QAnon stuff and like that Trump was in on that. And maybe I'm missing something. I just never really got into it. But maybe there is something there because he does love like puzzles and he's a chess player. So maybe there is a hidden message here.
Like I get when he puts phrases all in caps like peace through strength or
Yeah.
but he just randomly capitalizes words in his posts and I just find it so fascinating.
It's probably like, how certain words he'll like really enunciate. Like maybe that's how
Yeah.
he types too.
I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. But this whole deal with Netanyahu, like I thought yesterday it wasn't going to happen because he was not playing ball. Like it was not going to happen. But then this morning, I saw an article in BBC News that they've reportedly reached an agreement on the deal, and Israeli media is reporting that reps of Hamas, Israel, the US, and Qatar. Is it Qatar? Because I swear a fucking reporter called it Cater.
No, it's Qatar.
And I always pronounce things wrong, but I thought it was Qatar. But they've all officially signed a deal. And just, I want to comment on Biden's delusional belief that he was responsible for this peace deal and point out that even a top official from Qatar publicly stated that Biden may have started the deal negotiations, but he said Trump is the one who, quote, pushed it over the line, end quote, and made it successful.
Even Biden's own team was saying that in one of the briefings, how had Trump's people not been at the table and Trump not made those statements, this wouldn't have happened. Because, I mean, this deal has kind of been on the table since May. So why
Yeah.
do you think they're doing it days before Inauguration Day? It's because of Trump. Like, so Biden, whatever, he's delusional. No one believes him.
Yeah, okay. So I have to give an update on something from the fires, by the way. Still not contained. I've heard like thousands of people are being told they can't even return to the area for another week. Like,
Yeah, I've seen videos of people trying and they're being told no, and they're like arguing with, I don't know if it's the firemen or the police there. But last night I found out my cousin, she lives in that area, but she had a home she was flipping
mhm.
and the whole neighborhood's leveled. Her home is standing. And my
Whoa.
dad's been talking to her. I'm like, Dad, ask her if she had a smart meter. He's like, I'm not asking her that. I'm like, ask her. Like, I need to know. So
Did
I'll
you
keep you
see?
posted. I'm trying to find out.
Yes, we need to know that. Did you see that one photo? I think it was in Politico or AP News. It was like an old Volkswagen Beetle, like a bus, the Volkswagen
Oh,
bus, and
yeah.
it's the bright blue bus, and it's like the only thing that was not burned in this entire city block or whatever, and you can see the aerial view where
Yeah.
it's just this bus
There
untouched.
really is something to the blue. Like
Yeah.
scientifically, they've done like tests and stuff. Cause I remember looking into it with Maui. And ever since then, I'm like, um, telling my husband, what do you think about the color blue?
Yeah, we need to
Like we
paint
just
the
got a
house
new roof. We
blue.
didn't do blue, but I'm kind of regretting that now, but whatever.
But I will say, like, I obviously trash Newsom a lot and have like zero respect for this man. But the one thing I will give him this week is he has basically signed an executive order to prohibit like predatory real estate investors from taking advantage of wildfire victims. And so it's an order that's going to make it illegal for anyone to like make unsolicited excuse me offers on properties that are any less than like the fair market value in the area. So I'm hoping like that will at least keep some people from getting fucked over by these development companies that come in.
I hope so. I don't trust Newsom one bit.
No.
I think
Mm-mm.
he's probably doing that because he probably wants his buddies to get the contract for all
Right.
these, you know what I mean? Like, I don't trust him at all. But yeah, I really hope it does protect the people because, like I said in the previous episode, they're doing it in Florida. Like the smallest investor bought like 50 properties. So just imagine what the big investors bought, and they'll turn them into multi-million dollar homes that no one can afford that's in the middle class.
Yeah, and apparently State Farm is now offering renewals for people that were affected by the fires that they plan to like drop, but it only pertains to I guess it pertains to like 70% of the policies in the Pacific Palisades. But then there's thousands of others that won't be able to renew. So I don't know the full details of it, but it sounds like they're trying to backpedal. And then I heard they like pulled their ads from the what is it, the Super Bowl or something that's coming up in
Oh, yeah.
some big sports event or maybe yeah, some event, whatever. But the other
Well,
thing I wanted what?
with the insurance though, I was thinking like these homes are probably the most expensive in the United States.
Mhm.
Like, even normal, like smaller homes have still got to be what, like $1 million at least
Oh,
in that
at
area.
least. Oh,
So
more,
just
I would
imagine the
think.
mega mansions that are tens of millions. Like, I mean, that could literally cause the company to go bankrupt. And then what? Then
Right.
No one's getting anything. So I'm really just feeling for all the people that are completely screwed right now.
Oh, I know. I know. I do want to mention something else though, because there was a report that surfaced yesterday, and this just is yet another example of the complete lack of leadership in Los Angeles. And it was talking about how Mayor Bass opted not to deploy the city's crisis response team to the fires. And this is a team
Are
of
you
like,
shitting me?
no, I'm not.
When would
It's
you deploy a crisis response team? Like, how much more of a crisis could there be?
Yeah, that's why she's getting backlash for it. So there's this, I guess there's like 250 volunteers and they can be deployed for natural disasters. And I'm very familiar with this because oddly enough, I was part of this team years ago when I worked at Disney Fire. And I think it's been around since like the early 90s. But I remember going through a whole training certification process and doing mass casualty incident training with these crisis response teams. And I can say, at least back then, this was like 20 years ago, but back then they were very well trained. So the first volunteer team you would want to deploy in a disaster. And this article also pointed out how the city has spent over $1 million to train this group. And they're one of the best, you know, crisis response teams in the nation. Yet they didn't get deployed for over a week after the fire started. And it seems like the only reason that they did was because her office started getting questioned about why they weren't deployed and like why they weren't being used in shelters and community resource centers and stuff like that. And I guess there's a lot of drama with this whole thing because she fired the program director last May, and then there was like a bunch of scandals with another guy that was heading up the program. But I don't know the details of why the director was fired, but he was getting calls from like current members of the team that were telling him like they were on standby, not being deployed, and days were going by with these fires. So a former LAFD battalion chief, Rick Crawford, he did an interview with the New York Post, and he was explaining like the mayor doesn't even need to like wait to request these teams because she has the authority to deploy them at her discretion, and she didn't. So it's like this to me is just another example of like the complete mismanagement of the city's resources.
With all of the hot water she's in, where I mean, she's just getting it from all sides, you would
Yeah.
think she would go out of her way to make sure she's doing everything possible from this point forward. But okay, I wonder if this has anything to do with what I saw um, on BBC News. So they have a TikTok page and they did a whole like segment on some wealthy neighborhood. I don't know the name of it, but it was like a mega wealthy, like where the celebrities live in LA that hasn't yet been affected by the fires. And this reporter was going down the street and there were lines of fire trucks, but they didn't look like normal fire trucks. They were like painted different colors and they were just sitting there. And she said these are private fire trucks that these celebrities or whoever they are that live there have hired to just be on standby to protect their mega mansions. So, of course, people are outraged because they're like, this neighborhood isn't even affected. And all of these fire trucks are just sitting here. They could be helping where there are actual fires. And so I wonder, like, could that be part of that group? And that's why they weren't deploying them because they had to protect, these mega mansions.
I don't think so, because there are so many private fire companies that
Really?
yeah, I one of the guys I used to work with when I was at LAPD, he did that on the side as a side gig. And I think he worked like NASCAR races and the racing circuit, but it was a team that had like their own fire equipment and they were just hired for private use. And then everything I've been reading about these celebrities hiring these firefighters at $2,000 an hour minimum to protect their homes, like the city can't like commandeer them to protect the rest of the city because they are privately owned companies.
You would think
So
the city, though, would hire them. I mean, you're spending
you would
billions of
think,
dollars on like
yeah,
climate change. Why not hire anyone and everyone that'll come? I mean,
especially when 100 of your own fire trucks are sitting out of commission because
yeah,
there's no one to work
exactly.
on them.
And then the other thing, I don't know if you've heard an update on the death toll, but I mean, thank God, like knock on wood, it seems to be very low
Hmm.
considering it looks like the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And I hope that's accurate. I hope everyone got out in time.
Last I saw, it was still 25, but there's somewhere around like 30 people unaccounted for.
Okay. Well, I
So,
mean, that's terrible, but like looking at it, you would think thousands of people, you
oh
know?
yeah.
And so it's just, God, like I really hope that that's accurate and all these people got out. And it's just so sad seeing the area, like such a beautiful area, and it's gone, it's demolished.
Yeah, I sent you that video that one of my
Yeah.
coworkers sent me, and they were just like patrolling the area after the fires. And I've seen videos online, but I think it hits different when it comes from someone that I know that
Right.
is showing me what they're seeing. And it was like really the only word for it is apocalyptic. And
Yeah.
it's just you can't even picture that that area used to be these multi-million dollar homes, and now there's nothing, like nothing.
Nothing. I
Yeah.
mean, burnt, like the concrete burnt to
Yeah.
the ground.
Yeah. There's like you can see some street signs still and oddly some trees. But yeah, very, very sad. And I guess we'll see if there's any more updates next week. But you mentioned TikTok. And so I want to bring up the whole TikTok ban because apparently someone from the Biden administration, there was no name, but someone told NBC News yesterday that we should not expect to see TikTok suddenly banned on Sunday. And they're, quote, exploring options, end quote, for how to stop it from happening. But my question is this. Is it Biden or is it Trump that's trying to stop this from happening? Because Mike Walls, who's Trump's incoming national security advisor, he went on Fox News yesterday and he said that it's the Trump administration that's trying to put in measures to keep TikTok from going dark. And he said that the law gives an authority for a 90-day extension for ByteDance, the parent company, to complete a divestiture as long as a viable deal is on the table. And he's saying that this is what's going to give Trump time to keep TikTok going. So what I thought was interesting is that the CEO of TikTok, Shu Chu, is reportedly going to be one of the attendees at Trump's inauguration on Monday. So we have Congress pushing for an extension, and now Trump's pushing for an extension. And Biden's team is reportedly claiming, the guy who signed the TikTok ban into effect is now
Right.
trying to keep it around. But I guess we'll see if it actually goes offline on Saturday or not, or Sunday.
Well, Biden and everyone else that wanted it gone is probably like, we need to do something because they're all downloading Red Note,
Right.
the Chinese TikTok. Yeah, I did see that the CEO is going to be at Trump's inauguration, and I think that's a very good sign that they're not planning on going dark. So it'll be interesting. I saw the Daily Mail posted a video that said that Trump will save TikTok, like he said, even if it means he has to put an executive order in place overturning the ban. But I haven't heard Trump say that directly, but he keeps hinting around to it. So I don't think it's going to go away. I think, last minute, he will do whatever he needs to do if things don't go well with the Supreme Court. But something that I don't think most people realize, or at least I didn't realize until all of this started, is that TikTok isn't actually owned by like any Chinese company. So ByteDance, which is the parent company, they do have like a Chinese owned company, but TikTok is a completely separate entity that they created in the United States that's owned by investors from the United States and from all over the world. And that makes it even more concerning because it's like, are they setting a precedent to where you can go after any company you want that doesn't fit the government narrative? And so all this stuff that they're saying about China is absolutely false. Like it really is not a China company. So I just thought that was interesting to note because that's not a good sign for business owners.
No.
Um, and so okay, like with the Red Note app, um, I have to mention something. It's kind of off top. It's very off topic, but apparently the Chinese are telling the Americans on Red Note that the reason why we're all fat is because of ractopamine. Have you ever heard of ractopamine? Because
Nope.
I had not until now, but I looked it up.
It sounds like a dinosaur.
Right? Yeah. But I actually looked it up. I mean, there is a ton of information on it. It's a food additive that's given to animals to bulk them up faster. But when we then eat the meat, like they're saying that it's making us bulk up. And this additive is banned in 160 countries because it has all sorts of like known health issues. Um, and I guess it can be like considered a carcinogen. Hold on one second. My son has entered the room.
Perfect.
Okay, so this ractopamine is carcinogenic, but of course here in the United States it isn't banned, just like all these other harmful things. And so that's what the Chinese are telling us. They're like, they can't believe that we don't know about it. And I guess it's in like 80% of the pork in the United States. So yeah, that is something interesting that we should probably look into further, maybe even do a whole episode on it because look at Americans and the rate of obesity and disease, it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, I just looked it up while you were talking, and it is banned in the EU.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay, now we're gonna have to look into this because I've never heard of it before.
we need to do like a whole food episode because there's just so
Yeah.
much coming to light, especially with RFK getting in there.
Oh, I know. But I do want to ask you this or mention this. You just brought up Red Note and how, like, on Wednesday, you were talking about all of these Americans who switched from TikTok to Red Note, and they're seeing how, it's not China that seems to be the third world country, but it's the United States. And, we're the ones that are experiencing more of the oppression and the poverty. And I'll be honest, I really don't know what to believe because TikTok in China is state controlled, right? So I'm sure they monitor what people can and can't post on social media, and maybe it's propaganda. But I came across this article in the Daily Dot, and it was talking about like you were saying on Wednesday, all these American and TikTok refugees that have gone over to Red Note, and they're hearing from the Chinese citizens there, like, the life is pretty good. And one of the things that came up was the cost of food and healthcare. And someone posted like two dozen eggs in China cost a total of 25 cents, while Americans are paying an average of $6 for 1 dozen eggs. And so people are waking up to the fact that, Americans are working 2-3 jobs just to make ends meet. And then they're seeing that these Chinese citizens work less than 40 hours a week, and they own their homes, and healthcare is like super cheap. And I don't know what's propaganda and what's not, but I can say I definitely believe the healthcare thing and the lower cost of food, because even my experience living in the Czech Republic for the past year, I have paid cash every time I have gone to a doctor, and I have paid less paying cash with no insurance than I would make a copay with insurance in the United States. And I've been getting a bunch of dental work done here, like having, what do you call those when you have a cavity?
Filling?
A filling. I've had fillings replaced because they were like older fillings, and I've had them replaced with, I'm shocked by how modern the equipment is here, and they do shit that is so much more advanced than any of the care that I was getting in the United States. And it has cost me less to have several fillings replaced completely than to have one filling with fucking insurance in the States. So again, I don't know what's true and what's not true on Red Note, but I definitely think it's a good thing that people are highlighting what they're seeing in other countries that's pointing out everything that's wrong with America's healthcare system.
Yeah, well, the other thing that Chinese people were saying is that they can't believe what we're eating. They're like, you eat like you have free healthcare, but you have the most expensive healthcare in the world, but then you're eating all this food that's going to give you disease. Like,
Right.
so they're just seeing that they can't believe like how blind we are to it. And I think we're finally waking up to it. But on the same note, like Red Note is heavily regulated and censored by the Chinese Communist Party. So now,
Right.
like, all these people have downloaded it. And there was one guy the other day, and he's like, I was just playing my guitar and like singing a song, and it wasn't even about anything bad. And they like flagged his account saying it could harm children. And he's like, what? Like, I just like playing a song. So, there is that aspect to it. So it kind of makes you wonder too, like, would anybody admit it if they weren't happy in China? No, because
Right.
the government's listening. However, I have heard that. I've also heard one guy was explaining how there's no property tax. He's like, so I pay my mortgage, but he said, I don't pay a tax. I own this and they can't take it away because I didn't pay a property tax. And just like things like that are very eye-opening when we're told a different story.
I will say when I went to China, and this was mm, maybe 15 years ago that I went, I did not see any crime, any evidence of crime. It was clean. I mean, it was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences that I've had going to another country because I was so surprised by how clean and orderly everything was. And there
Yeah.
was just like zero crime.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, there's harsh penalties too. So it's like, it's just very different from the perception that you have in your mind based on what we've been told about
Mhm.
China, forever. So it's very interesting. But I do think the whole Red Note thing is making all politicians like take pause. Like, what are we doing here with TikTok? Because they're going to, go directly to the source if we ban it. So it's interesting. But the other thing, I got really excited about this, but then I got pissed very quickly when I was like thinking about it. Okay. So just in talking about banning food additives, the FDA finally banned red dye 3. Okay. So I was like, oh, that's great. But then I realized, wait, that's red dye 3. Red dye 40 is the one everyone's talking about that they think could be linked to like ADHD and all these different things. That's not banned. And, I guess, yeah, it's a start, but these food companies will have until 2027 to take it out of their products, which is bullshit because we've already said how they already make the products without it that they sell to Europe.
Mhm.
And remember a few months back when Kellogg's was being boycotted because they were refusing to take the red dye out of their cereal. And
Yeah.
then the FDA released a statement saying it's totally safe. But yet now, just a few months later, right before Trump and RFK get into position, they decide to ban it. So that just pissed me off because I'm like, they knew it was dangerous. They lied to the American people saying it's completely safe. And now they're only doing the right thing to save their ass and make it look like they're doing something. But they're not really doing something because they're only banning one red dye. They're not banning the other one that's even more concerning. And then I know you've mentioned this in the past, but it's like this was banned in cosmetic products back in the 90s for being linked to cancer, but they kept it in the food for another 30 years. So it's
Right.
like it is a small win, but it's also a slap in the face that we've been gaslit all these years by our FDA that's supposed to keep us safe and clearly has not.
Not just gaslit, but literally poisoned.
Yeah,
Poisoned by our
poisoned and
FDA.
lied to.
Yeah. And they're not even going to deal with this one dive for another 4 years, 3 years.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's, yeah.
And it makes
Okay.
you wonder, like, what other products
Well,
are
when you think
still
about,
allowed?
yeah, you think about, I can't remember the number, but I've talked about this before, all of the different additives and chemicals that are banned here in Europe that are still allowed in America. It's like such a discrepancy. Like
Mhm.
it's thousands, I believe. Maybe I'm saying that, maybe it's hundreds. I have to look it up because it's such an extreme difference. And that is like the biggest thing I'm concerned about with going back to the States is putting shitty food back into my system.
Yeah.
But in other news, I don't know if you saw yesterday, Congress voted on that House bill that would deport illegal migrants convicted of sex crimes, and 145 fucking Democrats voted against it. If you guys recall, this was the bill that was first introduced by Nancy Mace a while back, and it never got past the Senate because at the time they had control, Democrats had control of the Senate. But fortunately, it did pass yesterday. So you had 274 people voting for it, which included all of the Republican House members and a handful of Democrats. But again, 145 Democrats voted against it. And they were citing reasons like victims not wanting to come forward or just completely ridiculous shit. And after the vote, Elon posted on X and he said, quote, "There is no excuse. Please post the list of people who oppose this law and want to keep illegals who are convicted sex offenders in America. They all need to be voted out of office, every one of them." End quote. And I fucking agree 100%.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Send that list around the internet, and Elon Musk would be the perfect one to do that so people can see these are the people that are essentially voting for, rape and murder and just horrific crimes. And
Yeah.
how anyone can be okay with that, regardless of politics, is beyond me. It's disgusting.
Yeah. I just don't understand how you can, with a straight face, as
Mhm.
a congressperson, come up with some nonsense and
Yeah.
fucking vote against this. It just blows my mind.
We're divided on sex crimes and murder and rape now, but
Mhm.
they can band together for TikTok.
Right.
Democrats and Republicans can come together to ban TikTok, but they can't come together to make our healthcare system better, to keep us safe. Like, this should be a wake up call to everybody that
Yeah.
the whole thing is broken.
Yeah. 100%. Well, okay. Speaking of murder, so we need to talk about Tucker's interview with the mom of the Chat GPT whistleblower who supposedly committed suicide back in November. And Stephanie, I remember when you brought this up initially when he was found dead in his apartment, you were like, this is not a suicide. And we didn't know any details at that time. And now we do. And after listening to Tucker's episode, I think it was definitely murder.
Yes, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Which, by the way, that was fun. We should do that more often where we listen to an episode at the same time because then we can like compare notes.
Yeah.
And that was like crazy, but it's so sad. So, this guy, Suchir Balaji, he's only 26 years old and basically a genius. Like, his mom felt that he was a prodigy. And he was the one that was actually training the AI at OpenAI. So he was very close to it and knew all the ins and outs. And in October, he told the New York Times that ChatGPT was using copyrighted information. A month later, he's dead. And that was all we knew last time. And I was like, yeah, that's not a suicide. No way. But there's so much more to the story. So the authorities say that he died immediately from a single gunshot wound to the head that was self inflicted. However, thankfully, the mother took photos of the crime scene and there was blood everywhere, everywhere. So if you go to Tucker's TikTok, he shows the photos. And I mean, it's everywhere. It's in the bathroom, it's in the hallway, it's in the living room. And then there was also a piece of someone else's wig. So not the son, some other person, we don't know who, a piece of their wig was like ripped out and on the scene with blood on it. Okay. And then the other weird thing is the police go there and the mom is there. Like she can't get into the apartment. So she calls the police because she's like, my son's not answering his phone. Something's wrong. And they lie to her for hours saying they haven't been in the apartment yet, even though they had, and they knew he was dead. And so the way she found out was she saw the medical examiner or whatever, the person that comes to take the body. And they told her, yeah, we're here to pick up a body. That's how she found out. So, Tara,
Mhm.
like, is that normal? I mean, you were a police officer. Is that something you guys did?
I personally would not have lied. I'm maybe cops do. I don't know. Yeah, it was the coroner's van that she saw. And what I thought was really disturbing is they kept telling her they were waiting for more officers to come and search. So officers would show up and she's outside and then they're like, "Oh, we can't go in," even though they had already been in there. We
Yeah.
can't go in because we're waiting for more officers. And this woman was out there for hours. Like, and they told her at one point, they're like, just go home and we'll contact you in 5 or 6 hours. And to me, is that normal for law enforcement to do that? I guess it would depend on the crime scene. And like, I've been in some fucking crazy crime scenes where you have to secure the crime scene and you can't allow anybody to come in, but they're saying it wasn't a crime scene. So
Right.
then it doesn't fucking make any sense.
Yeah. Well, and then it gets worse because then, she finds out her son's dead. And then from that point on, within 40 minutes of, I don't know if it was the detective, I don't remember like those details, but she was saying within 40 minutes, they ruled it a suicide.
Mhm.
Like, how do you rule it a suicide within 40 minutes? And then, the body gets to the funeral home. The funeral director takes one look at it and tells her, get a second autopsy because this does not look like a suicide. So that makes it even more suspicious that, like, he takes one quick look and is like, this wasn't a suicide, but they're saying it was.
Well, I don't, from what I remember, he didn't, it wasn't even from looking at the body. It was from the procedures of the body even being sent to the funeral home that he said were just
Oh,
like not normal procedures. And he's like, you need to go get a second opinion because this whole process did not occur the way it should.
yeah. Well, and that I was wondering, like, in all those hours that she was waiting and they wouldn't say anything, were they getting phone calls? Like, were they calling and then getting phone calls from the higher ups to like, because something was covered up. Like,
Mhm.
this was not normal whatsoever. Um, and so, I can't help it. Like, my conspiracy brain, I'm like, okay, this was San Francisco. Who has that kind of power in San Francisco to get the police, the medical examiner, like everyone on board with this being a suicide? Well, Nancy Pelosi comes to mind. And I
Mhm.
just started thinking, like, it's becoming like the Clintons, where there's a lot of weird things piling up. So it's like, remember when that guy broke into her house and like physically assaulted her husband? And like the police weren't releasing the body cam footage for the longest time. And like their story kept changing. And it was just shady. Like there was just something weird about the whole situation. And then it was just kind of swept under the rug. And then there was the rumor about the United Healthcare CEO who was murdered, that he was about to testify against her when he was killed. And of course, like these are just rumors, there's nothing to them. But now in her city, this kid dies within 40 minutes. It's decided that it was a suicide. And so the whole thing's just weird. And so I couldn't help it. I had to look up, like, what does Nancy Pelosi have to do with OpenAI? Is there any connection? Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, there is. She is heavily invested in it. So OpenAI is a private company, but they took seed money, $100 million in seed funding from NVIDIA. And OpenAI like uses NVIDIA's AI processor. They're very connected. Well, Nancy Pelosi has millions of dollars worth of NVIDIA stock. And since she purchased it in 2023, their stock is up 176%. Like everyone's crediting her as being the sole reason the stock is like through the roof. And in August, the office of Nancy Pelosi officially posted on their website about California's bill to put safety standards in place for AI. And the article says, quote, widely credited with being the godmother of AI, she warned that California's artificial intelligence bill, SB 1047, would have significant unintended consequences that would stifle innovation and would harm the US AI ecosystem. So she's known as, like, she is self proclaiming, and her office is, that she's the godmother of AI. That's weird. And she's heavily invested in it. So something like a 26-year-old whistleblower going to the New York Times saying that there's copyright infringement could really screw her and her shares. So I'm not making any accusations. I'm just saying that, like, you would think that the godmother of AI would be paying close attention to a case of an open AI employee's suicide, who was also a whistleblower, that happened in her hometown of San Francisco. You know, kind of strange. And in the Tucker episode, the mother said that Sam Altman, who's OpenAI's CEO, has repeatedly tried to get her and her husband on a Zoom call to discuss stock options. Well, I think he's trying to get them on a Zoom call to figure out, what do the parents know? Like, did this guy
Yeah.
tell the parents more than they're letting on? And she's
Yeah.
smart because she is not talking to him and getting on a Zoom call. And instead, she went public with Tucker.
Yeah, she was saying that this was like almost immediately that they wanted to have this conversation, and they made it seem like it was urgent. Like, we have to discuss your son's stock options immediately. And she and her husband were like, we don't give a fuck. Like, this isn't important right now. We don't care about the money. We're grieving for our son. And like, the more I think about it, even just I'd be so curious to see the police reports, because the whole thing is just fucking shady. It doesn't add up. And thinking of it from a law enforcement perspective, there's no fucking way that I would be at a scene like that and seeing those pictures that Tucker posted and looking at that and saying that's a suicide, because it's fucking impossible. It's
Yeah.
fucking
And you were
impossible.
a detective. Like, you would
Yes.
know.
And you would have to, you would make that whole place a crime scene if you're seeing blood in the bathroom, the hallway, other rooms, and they're saying the guy just shot himself in the head. You're not going to shoot yourself in the head and walk around to different rooms. And then I guess there's all this controversy about the angle of the bullet, where the medical examiner is saying that it came from a certain angle, but then the guy who did the second autopsy is saying no, it was from the opposite angle. So like the stories don't fucking match. And then you and I were talking about this offline. I don't have any notes on it, but like, isn't that medical examiner complicit in all sorts of other
Yeah.
shady shit?
He lost. They think he threw out a human skull that was the only evidence in another murder. And so there was a whole thing on that, because a woman in his office, like, was a whistleblower and came out, and then she was terminated. And so now she's suing them. There's like all kinds of shady stuff. Then there was I think it was a public defender died, and the medical examiner said it was drugs and alcohol that killed him, like it was an overdose. But his family did a second autopsy, and they said the drugs, it was like so minimal, like that it had nothing to do with his death. So there's just like, there's been a history in San Francisco of weird things happening like that. And then the other thing is, the mom was saying like he had plans. He was getting ready to start another company. And then the very fact that he was a whistleblower, like, when you're a whistleblower, you're not thinking about suicide. You're thinking about like doing the right thing and like, you know, it should just be assumed any whistleblower is not suicidal. Like, if something
Right.
happens to them, that's a red flag. So the fact that none of this was taken into consideration is mind blowing.
Right. And that none of the media outlets were interested in covering this
Yep.
story. And she said
Yes.
something about the New York Times was like all interested until they found out it involved OpenAI and ChatGPT. And then suddenly they didn't want to cover the story.
Yes. And the other thing she said with them is they will not release what their son had given the New York Times until they go through whatever you have to go through to get like ownership of his property. I forget the
Mhm.
proper wording. So that made me think, okay, if they can't get something from the New York Times yet because the legal stuff isn't in place, then how the hell are they going to deal with stock options? So that
Right.
whole thing about Sam Altman saying we need right now to discuss stock options is bullshit.
Yeah. This is a crazy case, and I'm just hoping that by Tucker having his mom on, that this brings like wider um interest in finding out what actually happened. Because at one point in the interview, he's talking to her about a Congress member, and he's like, have you
Ro
tried to,
Khanna.
yeah, she's like, we've tried to contact him and we've heard nothing back. And so in the middle of the interview, he gets on his phone and he's like, well, I'm sending him a text right now. And so I'm just curious if anything's going to come of this, because this is so, in my mind, this is so fucking deep what's going on here.
Yeah, and not to mention, like Elon Musk has been talking about Sam Altman for a long time and how this guy is not a good person. Like he accused
Yeah.
Elon Musk of like worrying too much about humanity. So,
Well, even Elon Musk back in December, like when this, I think the murder, suicide, whatever it is, was like November 26th or something like that. I remember Elon Musk posted early December about this doesn't add up and this is not a
yeah.
fucking suicide.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But I want to mention one more thing because you brought up the United Healthcare CEO case, right?
Hmm.
And this kind of ties into what I was saying earlier about the insane cost of healthcare in America as compared to what I've experienced in Europe and what people are reporting on Red Note about China. But this article actually came out yesterday in Fortune, and it was talking about how United Healthcare has been overcharging cancer patients for drugs by over 1,000%. And there was a report by the Federal Trade Commission, and there are three pharmacy companies. There's Optum RX, which is United Healthcare's pharmacy, and then Cigna's Express Scripts, and then CVS Caremark R. And collectively, these three pharmacies have pocketed over $7.3 billion over the past 5 years just from overcharging people for life-saving drugs. And the report concluded, quote, the big three PBMs marked up numerous specialty generic drugs dispensed at their affiliated pharmacies by thousands of percent and many others by hundreds of percent, end quote. And then they gave the example of like, making the price of a drug that costs $10 wholesale, they're then selling at their pharmacies for $110. And it was found that this was being done to 22% of specialty drugs, including those used to treat leukemia, pulmonary hypertension, and HIV. So again, this just speaks to how fucking corrupt our healthcare system is in America.
Yeah, the healthcare system and the food system, it's like
Mhm.
we don't stand a chance. I mean, they are quite literally like poisoning us and then making it damn near impossible to get the treatment needed.
Yeah.
And it's criminal. And I hope that it gets addressed with this new administration.
Yeah. So speaking of which, Monday,
Yep.
Trump gets sworn in on Monday, and I'm pretty sure it happens after our recording because I don't think he's getting sworn in until later in the afternoon. Um,
Right. And
but
guess who's going to be there at his inauguration?
who?
Sam Altman. Him,
Oh,
Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg all donated like $1 million each to be there. And it's like, I'm not buying their bullshit, you know? I hope Trump doesn't
No.
either.
And I heard like the only like person, like elite um and government person that's not going is Michelle Obama. Like
Yeah.
Obama's going, Biden, I think even Kamala's going, like, and Michelle Obama is the one that's not going to be there.
Well,
I don't
I
think
don't
any of
think
them should
anyone's
be
going to miss
there.
her.
Well, we'll
Oh,
see.
okay. It can't come soon enough, but that's a lot for one day,
Yeah.
especially the whole open AI thing like that. I really hope it goes further with Tucker's
Me too.
podcast, and I think it will. So we'll keep everyone posted on that and everything else going on. But I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.